California task force to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans. Court. Content warning. Contains discussions of racial discrimination, sexual assault, torture, lynching, and other forms of extreme violence. Contains unedited historical quotations and photographs of white supremacist hatred, torture, lynching, autopsy, and other forms of graphic violence.
Discrimination against Black artists and culture. Have faced intense discrimination and restriction in the United States since the era of slavery. During the period of enslavement, enslaved people faced legal restrictions from many state governments while creating arts, crafts. In education, many enslaved people were highly talented craftspeople and artists, including seamstresses and tailors, blacksmiths, woodcutters, and musicians of all types. 13. They fabricated architectural materials, furnishings, musical instruments, such as banjos and handicrafts, baskets and rugs. 14. Free African American artists did engage in self-expression during the period of enslavement, however they had to rely on outside resources or wealthy white patrons to support their careers. 15. Enslavers were suspicious of the subversive potential of black art. 16. After 1730, South Carolina outlawed dancing, drumming, loud instruments by enslaved people for fear that it would incite rebellions. Other states enacted similar laws. 17. Concerned that literate enslaved people would incite insurrections, Southern enslavers banned enslaved people from learning to read or write. 18. Enslaved people who were not allowed to read or write, instead, traditions of song and dance to pass along subversive messages and resist slavery, and to share routes for escape. 19. Enslaved people created music during the period of enslavement, but they could not capitalize on their creative efforts the way that white people could. 20. Yet, through work songs, cries, and hollering, enslaved people coordinated labor, communicated with one another, and commented on the oppression they suffered. 21. Were subject to segregation by custom and by law, enforced by state and local governments. 22. Black musicians were forced to join segregated local chapters of professional musician associations, which were segregated due to racism in the music industry. 23. They were from employment in city symphonies, radio stations, and clubs outside of segregated black neighborhoods, due to racist employers, unions, and police enforcement of segregation. 24. Concert venues were often segregated due to racist customs. 25. Musicians were subject to arbitrary, racist rules. 26. They could not make eye contact with white Americans who were usually standing right in front of the stage, while African Americans were confined to balconies. 27. Black musicians also could not stay at many hotels, were banned from restaurants, served rotten food at others. 28. Such customs were enforced by state and local police. 29. Black artists who challenged segregation were met with violence. For example, a musician in Georgia was brutally beaten for refusing to say, "Sir," in response to a white man's question at a concert in 1951. 30. Black artists were driven from white towns in the South, barred from performing, faced by white people brandishing guns. 31. An interracial all-woman jazz group performed at some integrated concerts, but were occasionally turned away and even jailed. 32. Consequently, governments failed to investigate or prosecute racist violence against African American artists. Black sacred spirituals, hymns, gospel music, and freedom songs deeply influenced 20th century American popular music. 33. Many acclaimed and influential American musical artists began their careers in black church choirs. 34. Black churches birthed gospel music, sound rooted in spirituals sung during slavery, integrated with chanting, clapping, participation. 35. Gospel choirs began broadcasting on public radio stations and church memberships grew to thousands. 36. Much of the music of the civil rights movement was inspired by gospel and congregational hymns. 37. Despite creating and innovating styles of music, such as blues, gospel, rhythm and blues, soul, jazz, rock and roll, and disco, black musicians and artists suffered from limited opportunities for financial success. 38. White artists appropriated and profited from black music. 39. For example, 1909 Copyright Act, a record could Only after obtaining a license from the original artist. 40. However, many black musicians' contracts robbed them of these copyright protections. 41. This led to a licensing regime that prevented black musicians from gaining financial success. 42. Black musicians recorded music on race records, played on segregated radio stations and marketed only to African Americans. 43. During the 1920s and 1930s, black musicians were subjected to contracts where the copyright for their work would be assigned to their employer, while being paid less than white musicians who had similar contracts. 44. For example, Presley imitated black blues and R&B singers, and to these exploitative contracts, the original song creators whose work he appropriated were not even paid for the use of their music. 45. One of Elvis's hit songs, "That's All Right Mama," was originally written and recorded by Arthur Crudup, a black man who was paid so little for his recordings that he had to work as a laborer selling sweet potatoes. 46. This type of appropriation was so pervasive that many Americans did not understand that these art forms were invented by black artists. 47. The federal government neglected to take action to protect African American artists from financial exploitation. African Americans have historically been discriminated against by governments and employers for their fashion, hair, and appearance through criminalization and the United States Army did not allow African Americans to wear their hair in locks, dreads, or dreadlocks until 2017. 49. Black women in the Army had been forced to straighten their hair with chemicals or hot irons, wear expensive and uncomfortable wigs, off to abide by the Army's hair regulations. 50. Many states passed laws that prohibited sagging clothes in public places, and instituted a significant fine or jail sentence if an individual was caught sagging pants. 51. Sagging originated from hip-hop culture. Laws target black boys and criminalize black adolescent fashion, inviting police to intrude in black life. 52. In 2007, Shreveport, Louisiana passed a law banning sagging, in black men accounting for 96% of those arrested for sagging. 53. Schools have removed African American students for hairstyles that have violated their dress codes. 54. A black student at a Texas school was told that he could not attend his prom because his locks were too long. 55. The Crown Act stands for creating a respectful and open world for natural hair, would prohibit discrimination based on hair texture or hairstyle. 56. While this act has been introduced in Congress, as of March 2022, it has not been passed. 57. As of 2021, only 13 states have passed versions of the Crown Act. 58. Many African American fashion designers who were influential in American fashion history, whose clients included first ladies and government officials, suffered from racism that was supported by federal and state governments. 59. Elizabeth Keckley was a black woman and fashion designer who dressed the First Lady, Mary Todd Lincoln. 60. Keckley was born an enslaved person and suffered violence and sexual assault from white enslavers. 61. Keckley worked as a seamstress for several years, raise money to pay back the loans she used to purchase her freedom. 62. She faced legal restrictions in establishing her business, including the requirement that a white man vouch for her freedom. 63. Anne Lowe was a black woman and fashion designer who designed Jacqueline Bouvier wore when she married Senator John F. Kennedy, along with many other gowns for an exclusive clientele. 64. Lowe worked as a seamstress with her mother on a plantation in Alabama and later made dresses for wealthy white women in the South. 65. She could not get credit or rent a space in the business district in the South, and was forced to operate out of a segregated neighborhood. 66. Anne Lowe did not receive recognition in the fashion industry, despite her well-loved designs. 67. Music, one of the most culturally potent and commercially successful forms of black expression in the latter half of the 20th century, has been criminalized by federal, state, and local governments. 68. By the late 1980s, were unable to book performances and were being subjected to intrusive searches and surveillance. 69. Rap lyrics and videos have been used in criminal trials to associate black artists with crimes and to prove the substance of threats or incitements to violence during trial and sentencing. 71. Scholar, hundreds of cases in which rap lyrics have been used as evidence in prosecution 71 writing rap lyrics and making rap music videos has led to black students being disciplined 72 in Bellevue. County SCH. BD. 2015, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit stated that a school could discipline a student for a rap music video he made off campus, after learning that two white teachers allegedly sexually harassed several black students 73. Enforcement agencies and local governments have attempted to chill or criminalize the sale of rap albums based on their content, sometimes canceling rap performances outright 74. For example, law enforcement agencies attempted to suppress the music of Compton rap group NWA's 1988 debut album. Compton, and particularly their song, Fuck the Police, 75 in 1989, the assistant director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation Office of Public Affairs sent a letter to the distributor of the album, criticizing the group's lyrics regarding law enforcement and making the record label aware of the FBI's position relative to this song and its message. 76 law enforcement officials have attempted to prohibit record stores from selling rap albums to minors. 77 during a 1989 NWA concert in Detroit, law enforcement in the crowd contained 200 police officers, rushed the stage and ended the concert early. 78. California, city governments decimated thriving black neighborhoods with vibrant artistic communities. 79 California theaters denied entry to black patrons. 80 in 1876, Charles Green, an African-American man, explicitly denied entry into the McGuire's New Theater in San Francisco. 81 The theater owner was sued by the U.S. attorney but a jury acquitted him after the judge excluded evidence. 82 Decades later, from the 1930s to 1960s, projectionist and other movie house workers fought for employment and equal wages at movie houses, striking, negotiating, and picketing in the face of violent confrontations with local police. 83 In San Francisco, African American artists had limited opportunities due to segregation. 84 The bassist, Vernon Alley, described the time in San Francisco when black bands couldn't play east of Van Ness Avenue. That's true, I was a part of it. 85 Alley stated that white musicians' unions fought against black musicians who attempted to play in downtown San Francisco. 86 Many black musicians struggled to make a living by playing behind curtains for tourists or out of sight at strip clubs. 87 Consequently, it openly allowed segregation and discrimination against black musicians, workers, and artists. Californians continue to face discrimination in the television and film industries in California. In 1940, McDaniel became the first black actor to receive an Academy Award. She was forced to sit at a separate table because the hotel in which the award ceremony was held did not allow black people into the building. 88 Today has shown that Hollywood studio executives associate casting black actors with financial risk. 89 In a vicious cycle, black-led projects are characterized as economically inviable, therefore, they are underfunded. Despite earning higher returns, 90 black actors face a lack of opportunity and black people are underrepresented in top management in the film and television industries. In off-screen talent in Hollywood. 91 The state has failed, overall, to adequately engage in civil rights enforcement in the motion picture industry. In the 1940s and 1950s, the Fillmore neighborhood in San Francisco was home to a vibrant African American community and referred to by locals as the Harlem of the West. 92 The Fillmore was home to a vibrant black jazz scene, social clubs, important cultural hub. 93 In the 1950s and 1960s, the city of San Francisco tore down black-owned jazz clubs and businesses and built an expressway through the district in the name of redevelopment. 94 See Chapter 5 on housing. 1930s and 1940s, the zoot suit, a particular style of suit with a long coat and loose pants, became an icon of resistance against assimilation for communities of color. 95 The increase in migration of Mexican Americans and African Americans to Los Angeles resulted in the growth of interracial communities of color. targeted by the Los Angeles Police Department 96 to confront the dehumanizing social and economic conditions imposed by the wartime political economy, local officials, and the mainstream press. The zoot suit became a symbol of resistance for those who wore it. 97 However, in the eyes of state officials and law enforcement, the zoot suit and those who wore it were labeled as criminal and hypersexual. 98 Americans in Los Angeles were victims of the mob violence and criminalization by local police that preceded and followed the Zoot Suit riots of Los Angeles. 99 In June 1943, the Zoot Suit riots of Los stemmed from tensions between white servicemen at the new Naval Reserve Armory and local Mexican-American youth. 100 Violence broke out as gangs of white sailors attacked brown and black youth in zoot suits. 101 On the worst day of the violence, and civilians poured into Los Angeles and attacked the black neighborhoods of Watts, as well as other neighborhoods around Los Angeles. 102 All 94 non-white civilians who were seriously injured were arrested by the Los Angeles Police Department. Only 2 of the 18 white servicemen who participated. 103 The police arrested and jailed Mexican-American and African-American victims of the mobs rather than the white sailors. 104 The Los Angeles Police Department engaged in preventative enforcement based on racial profiling. African Americans among other communities in Los Angeles. 105 Law enforcement efforts to publicize crackdowns on youth resulted in hundreds of arrests in the summer of 1942. 106 This show of force was designed to reassure white middle classes that wartime police forces maintain law and order by rounding up innocent youth of color, many of whom were black. 107 Governments in California have discriminated against, punished, and penalized black students for their fashion, hairstyle, and appearance. In March 2018, at Tenaya Middle School in Fresno, officials pulled a black student out of class for a haircut with shaved-in designs. 108 They cited a dress code policy and separated him from other students. 109 They also prevented him. Chapter 9. Control over creative, cultural, and intellectual life. Lunch and gave him extra work to complete. 110 In 2015, a black biracial student was not allowed to attend school in Clovis because his hair was too long, in violation of the school dress code. 111 The student was given a warning, a subsequent lunch detention, 2 hours of after-school detention, 4-hour after-school detention, and 3 additional unofficial violations. 112 Historically, state-funded California museums have excluded black art from their institutions. In 2019, the Los Angeles Museum of Contemporary Art began an informal audit of its collection to increase the representation of black artists. 113 In 2020, the museum announced a list of new acquisitions that included black artists such as Lauren Halsey, Latoya Ruby Frazier, and Senga Nengudi. 114 The University of California, Los Angeles's Hammer Museum engaged in a similar audit in July 2020. The longest-tenured curator at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art resigned after stating that he did not believe in discrimination. 115 The resignation was related to a larger problem at the museum with respect to racial equality. 116 The museum's staff is only 4% black and employees report that key leadership positions are dominated by white Americans. 117 has also criminalized black rap artists. Los Angeles law enforcement leaders had been targeting rapper Nipsey Hussle's businesses, before and after his death in 2019, alleging gang activity and stopping hundreds of people in a predominantly black neighborhood. Very few arrests. 118 For over 20 years, California courts allowed rap lyrics to be used as evidence related to street gang activity. 119 Francisco, African American artists had limited opportunities due to segregation. The bassist, Vernon Alley, described the time in San Francisco when black bands couldn't play east of Van Ness Avenue, and that's true. I was a part of it.